pretty fired up. They're all fired up, but it's interesting who views whom as their rival with Tennessee.
Age group, I think. Tennessee did not play Georgia or Florida regularly until 1992 when we went to division play.
Right.
I was there the whole decade of the 80s, and you go back well before that. It was always Auburn and Alabama. Normally, Tennessee would play Auburn first and then Alabama. And if you didn't beat one of those, and usually two of those, you weren't in the conference championship race. So and vice versa. Those are the two big ball games, certainly.
You just got to beat Alabama and Auburn every year, Coach. That's no big deal, right? If you want to have it, a great season.
It's a little bit easier now to beat one of them than it was the other one. But it's pretty darn difficult to beat those guys down in Tuscaloosa.
I know it's Florida week, but you mentioned Tuscaloosa, and I'm sure we'll talk about him a lot coming up. But what Nick Saban has done and continues to do, I saw somebody complaining because they said NIL, that people making money off their lights, would tip the scales for Alabama. Hey, I got news for you, buddy. The scales are already tipped. They get whoever they want.
He has that unique ability, and I've gone back and watched him for years now, even before he got to Alabama, LSU. Mm-hmm. Every place he's been, really. He's a forward thinker. He does things like I guarantee you he's been on top of name, image, likeness longer than anybody else. When we first started going to the analyst 10, 12 years ago, he was the first to do that. He looks ahead and he stays on top of things. He was the first defensive coach to realize, hey, we got to start playing a little bit of offense, change that.
Right.
And you put on top of that, it's a great traditional program. They're going to draw players just because of that. But the way that he evaluates, Blaine and I were just talking before we went on the air about some of the guys. Josh Jacobs is a great example out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Heck, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma didn't even recruit him. Alabama sees him, brings him in, and look what he's doing or what he did. But anyway, he's a top quality coach. I think the most amazing thing about him to me is that he can flip that switch on Sunday and get right back into whatever the win is. He's right back into that next week, and his players play like that. And I think for the rest of the league, probably the worst thing could have happened that happened last Saturday. Mm-hmm. They had a close ball game. It's one of those deals. I had a good Alabama buddy of mine said Florida buddy of mine said we almost beat him. And I said, there's a bunch of them out there that almost beat him.
Dude, I can't imagine what the first practice was when they had on pads this week. What it was like as a player. Ooh. Oh, I bet he was lit out there. Oh man, how does he do it? I mean, man. How does he say that? You said he can flip the switch the next day whenever they go into practice. How does he do it at this age and with all the success that he has? Because he feels like he's not slowing down at all.
Blaine, I don't know. He's, 69, I believe. You think back, the guy of my era who everybody looked up to, and certainly I did, was Coach Bryant. He was out of coaching at 69. Matter of fact, I think he passed away at 69. But he somehow does it. He obviously loves it. And he's – the way he continually has staff turnover. I mean, every year he loses.
Him.
He loses maybe two coordinators. But he's got a system. He believes in it, and the players believe in it, and he's doing pretty well right now.
Well, on to the swamp is where Tennessee will be at. And I saw this one stat, and I bet you remember this game. Tennessee hadn't beat them since 2003 in the swamp. Is that true? Do you remember that game?
I remember when they beat them down there, but I don't remember what year it was. I think they've lost one in the last 15 years or something like that.
Right. I think they 15 of the 16.
They've lost 15 of 16.
Yeah. Tough place to play.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's been a tough place to play for them when they play them in Knoxville. I will say this, though. There was 2 or 3 years going back to the almost. There's a couple of games, maybe 3 in Knoxville, where Tennessee, one in Florida, I was there, had a great opportunity to win, and Florida found a way, particularly the last one down in Florida. They had fourth down plays, including a 15-yard a pass turned into fourth 15 turned into a touchdown. But Florida has a way of winning down there, and even when the teams are pretty evenly matched, Florida has a way of winning, and that's what Tennessee has to overcome. They got to figure out how they can beat Florida. Now this year, Florida's got a better football team, but we all know if you go down and you can stay in the game, one of the things, if you go back and look over the years of Southeastern Conference football, particularly teams that are relatively close, almost every game goes into the fourth quarter. So the object on the road is always to get into the fourth quarter. And if you get into the fourth quarter with a chance to win, who knows what's going to happen? A fumble punt, a block punt, a tip pass, something like that can turn the proverbial tide, so to speak. But that's what you try to do. You try to stay in ball games. And if there was ever a true axiom or maxim in Tennessee lore, you got to play every play to the last play of the game, because you just don't know when one of those plays are going to happen. And that's what Tennessee's going to have to do here. Florida's a little bit better, maybe a good bit better. But Tennessee playing well enough, playing really well on defense. And the one thing that we've seen out of Florida now, they don't throw the ball like they used to. Now they run it exceptionally well,
Sure do.
particularly with the quarterback. But running quarterbacks are easier to defend than passing quarterbacks. So, we'll see. And I'm anxious to see what Coach Heupel is going to do. Essentially, offensively, he's done very little as far as different schemes on offense. They pretty much run 2 or 3 plays, most of them inside. I think we'll see exactly what his offense looks more like. I don't know if Tennessee, though, has identified yet, Blaine and Mickey, who their playmakers are. Who are the guys that can make plays? Defensively, kicking game, I think they know. But who are those guys on offense? Their 2 tight ends have caught 15 passes. That is, by far leading the team.
Yes.
And while it's important to have tight ends catch passes, that's not the way you beat good teams. Right. They got to find somebody outside. They got some chances, some folks out there, some body, but they got to get that ball to those playmakers. And I think we'll see what Coach Heupel's offense really is this week, because they'll have to pull out all stops to win this game.
Well, if both quarterbacks are healthy, who do you think he's going to go with, and who would you go with?
Boy, I don't know. Here's what I don't know.
Did you see this today, Coach? He said he's leaning just towards playing one guy. That's what Heupel said.
In his mindset, if you listen to him all the time, I think that's where his mindset is always at, is to just play one guy. That's why Bailey didn't get in a blowout to the fourth quarter.
Well, and the thing about this team is Milton and Milton in particular, but certainly him and Hooker, they're both similar players. I mean, it's not like you're going to get a different look from one to the other. I don't know, haven't asked him, don't know if he'd tell me. I don't know what his feeling is about an injured player that misses a game. Does he get his spot back when he comes back? He's not said. My guess is he'll probably go with Hooker, but it's just strictly a guess. If he goes with Milton, it means that he really believes that the first couple of games, the overthrown passes, because if there'll ever be a game that Tennessee will need to hit deep throws, it'll be this ball game. It'll be this game, it'll be Georgia, and it'll be Alabama, because all 3 of those teams are going to play that bump man coverage outside. They're not going to give any help, and they're going to stop everything, clog up everything inside. And if Tennessee cannot hit deep passes, cannot hit some of those splash plays long, they'll be playing uphill all day. I'd never say they don't have a chance, because there's always ways you can win ball games, but they've got to be able to hit some deep throws. They got some players who can do it, and Milton has not shown he can do that yet. But if they go with him, I was asked a little earlier, Coach Mack and I were taping coach to coach, and one of the questions was, why do you think he went with Milton the first game? Well, it's simple, because in preseason practice and in scrimmages, he was the best guy in Coach Heupel's eyes. So, but to answer your question, I don't know. But I thought, Tennessee Tech was not very good, but I thought Hooker did some good things in that game. He looked more decisive. When he decided to run, he ran. It wasn't, what we used to call the old flattened squirrel. Yeah. The old flattened squirrel. Right. Squirrel gets out in the road and he starts, am I going or am I staying? And then he gets run over, right? Well, that's
Granted, he made some mistakes, but he looked more safe. He's more to my type of quarterback. Really, when I was watching him, I just felt like he ran the offense better. There's a couple things I want to ask you, though, and that is, when you're trying to decide if one kid has more upside, and we're talking about a 4-year guy now, and he has upside. When does you get to a point as a coach you say upside is out the window? He is who he is. When do you get to that point as a coach?
I think you have to see him a while, but that is a good question on Milton. The question I think every Tennessee fan has. You don't have to be a coach to know this. Can he throw the deep pass? He has not shown he can do it. I kind of joked on Big Orange Sunday a few weeks ago. This isn't punt, pass, and kick.
Right.
You don't get points for how far you can throw the football. Don't know if he can do that or not. One thing that both of them have to do, though, Blaine, Tennessee's had 6 turnovers in 3 ball games. All 6 of them have been by the quarterback position. I think Hooker's had 4 of them. So, you'll never hear me say you can't win and have turnovers because you're going to have turnovers. But 5 of those 6 turnovers have been fumbles by the quarterback. Just one's been an interception. You got to hold on to the ball, which is, difficult to do sometimes.
We're on with the coach, Coach Doug Mathews. Mickey.
That's right. Doug Mathews brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. On average, a DUI can set you back $10,000. It can also cost your life. Remember, fans don't let fans drive drunk. Brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. You can also catch the Coach Football Saturday, Big Orange Sunday right here on the Zone. Saw some good news today involving Cooper Mays. Looks like the offensive line will get him back. And, Florida always has some guys who can terrorize you on their front. So a healthier offensive line for the Tennessee Vols is really good news, especially this week.
I was really a little surprised at how good Florida looked defensively, particularly on the defensive front against Alabama. They got a couple of really, really big-time players up there. It looked like in that one ball game. And Tennessee getting Cooper Mays back is almost a must because what's happened is, Calbert, they went into this season with 6, maybe 7 good offensive linemen. Calbert got hurt early. He's out for the season. And when Cooper Mays got hurt, that made them move. Their backup center was Carvin, who moved to center. Well, he's as a natural guard. Center's a different position, and then they had to start moving some guys around. But if they can line up with Cade Mays and Wright at tackle and Spraggins and Carvin at guard and Cooper Mays at center, that is a good starting 5. Not going to have much depth there, right, but that's what they have to go with right now. Cooper Mays not a great player. He's just a sophomore getting better, but he's a good player. But more importantly, it lets Carvin move out to that natural guard position.
We've talked a lot about just the emotions Florida went through because it looked like they were going to get blown out. Then they came back and, a 2-point conversion that doesn't go the right way, and apparently somebody was lined up wrong. It was the right call, but a guy in the wrong place, so they literally could have tied that game with about 3 minutes left. If you're Tennessee, is this maybe emotionally a good time to play Florida and even physically because Bama beats on you?
Oh, I can guarantee you it is physically. Listen, I played at 4 different places I coached. Played Alabama 14 times, 10 of them at Tennessee. And I'll just speak from the Tennessee position. No matter whether we won or lost at Tennessee, the next week, and it was normally Georgia Tech, we had a tough time. And Georgia Tech wasn't really good back then. They beat us 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. Florida will go through that. One thing I did want to mention, though, and this is just what I see in this league. There's 2 teams in this league, maybe 3, but 2 teams in this league that don't let Alabama – the aura of Alabama affect them. Auburn's one, and Florida's the other. I think Georgia's does somewhat. And, of course, Georgia and Florida don't play them all the time. But, listen, you could tell in that ball game, Florida had no fear of playing Alabama. And you're right. They got behind significantly and came back and had a 1.5-yard 2-point play to win, but at least go into overtime on
right.
it. So, but they don't fear them. And I think other teams do, quite frankly.
Coach Doug Mathews, our guest here on Blaine and Mickey, talking Tennessee Vols, Florida Gators ahead of Gators game.
When I was watching the game, last week, it really made me look at Hooker. Did it seem like he runs the offense at maybe a slower clip than Milton? And does that help or hurt going against Florida when you're in the swamp, the noise? Because you can get to a point where you're doing the no huddle and then you're doing 3 and out. Real quickly now, 30 seconds go by, you ran 10 seconds off the clock for each play. The next you're running them. And then if you don't get a first down and you're limited to just passing the football and you're not completing them, That's going to put your defense. They're going to be out there like a dog with his tongue out, like, hey man, I got to get some first downs.
One of the things that I'm sure Coach Heupel's looked at, Tennessee is essentially somewhere about 10 minutes per game behind in total time of possession. They're like 20, maybe 25 to 35. So they're behind on that. And the other thing that, again, this will be the first time that these players, remember last year, no crowds, right?
Right.
This will be the first time they play 3 home ball games. They're going to now have on the road, this will be a loud crowd. But the plus on that, Blaine, and this is something that and when I was coaching defense, you used to really like. The good thing is, though, on offense, it really affects you. It could affect you. But defensively, because the home team is on offense, you can make all your checks and calls because the crowd's not loud. That's the one plus that you get. So you can communicate defensively. Offensively, they're going to have to do a lot of it just by silent count, only way they can handle it.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask you about the scheduling. I know they changed from playing Army to Akron. Tell me the good and the bad, if you have either side of this, of why that happened. A lot of people
tell you my
play the Naval
guess.
Academy, but I know they don't want to play the read option. You don't want to prepare for that.
I don't think it's the option, Blaine, as much as it is this. All 3 of those academies, they cut block. They got smaller linemen. They're down on all 4s, and they cut block. And I think that had as much to do with it as anything else. I really do. And I can understand that. Now, I don't know who went to where. I don't know. I don't know if that was Coach Heupel. They're paying $500,000 to do it.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But I think that's what it is more than anything else. Those you don't work on that, except that 1 week. And they get down there. That's the only block now in college football. The only block that you can make below the waist is in the line of scrimmage, and nobody does that except the academies and the teams that run the option look on it. And it's different. I mean, as you know, you're used to taking offensive linemen on up high, and it is a different technique to get those hands down. You got to play their head into the ground. I coached defense several years against the wishbone teams, and that's one of the difficult things you have to do against them. You have to get your it's a complete different attack from your defensive folks. You got to get your hands on their hat instead of underneath their shoulder pad. So I don't know if that's what it was, but it would make sense for me to do it.
Coach.
You got me all excited thinking about Larry Lacewell's wishbone teams at Arkansas State in the 80s that used to run for, 400 and 500 yards regularly. 400 or 500 yards. Just crazy.
Lacewell knew how to defend it because he coached the other side of it when he was in Oklahoma.
He did. And I think that's why he thought, well, shoot, nobody can prepare for it except me. I'll just run it against everybody.
We could tell Lacewell stories. When I left Tennessee in 1989, Larry came in and was the defense coordinator.
Right.
Called me, and we had some good conversations after that. He was a tremendous assistant coach. He was all those Switzer wishbone teams.
Yeah,
the backbone of those teams were not good defense, great defense by the University of Oklahoma.
Sure was. Larry Lacewell, also scouting director for the Cowboys' 3 Super Bowl teams.
Yep.
Yeah, Google him, kids.
Bad shape now.
Yeah, he's not doing well.
But he was part of that. Any of those guys that were part of the old Arkansas teams, they're a lot of fun to be around. There's a bunch of them out there too, by the way.
Okay, Lucas is going to yell at us, but I have to tell you this before we leave. Lacewell, and Tennessee people who of a certain age know who Larry Lacewell is. He was also a legend at Arkansas State. He carried around for years. He's not doing well now. A Crown Royal bag full of Super Bowl rings, SEC rings, Sugar Bowl rings. He had just Big 8 rings. He had all these rings, national championship, and he would take out his SEC championship rings from Tennessee every time he did a speaking engagement in Jonesboro, and he would say, yeah, I wanted Hog fans to see what SEC championship ring looked like, so I brought them with me again tonight. Like, he would gig them every time. You did not miss to Coach Lacewell. Yeah, we could do this forever.
He's the most unlikely football coach you'd ever see. He's probably 5'4". Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, about 5'4".
From Fordyce, Arkansas.
Had
Friends
a
of Bear
bad
Bryant.
eye. Had a bad eye.
Blind in one eye.
But he was a heck of coach. Real quick, Lucas can holler at me since you guys.
He's gonna get it.
Bobby Proctor, who people have heard on my show, was a secondary coach at Oklahoma with him. He told me, and Coach Proctor was around a lot of really top coaches. He said Larry Lacewell was the very, very best game day play caller and making adjustments of anybody he has ever. And that's a skill.
Yeah.
That's a skill to be able to adjust during the ball game. He said he was outstanding at it. And if Bobby Proctor said it, I believe it.
I believe it, too. I know Coach Lacewell very well. Always great stuff, Coach Mathews. We can talk football. We can tell stories. This segment goes too fast.
See you next week.
Tennessee Highway Safety Office making it happen. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. We're back to wrap up Blaine and Mickey after this.
It's the two best teams in the AFC South.